So in today's video, I'm going to be reacting to his story. Yeah. So make sure you check him out. Subscribe, because I know this is definitely gonna be a bang. Now short, latest, oldest, not popular. Let's go popular. He's most popular.
My twin brother Chris and I were 9 when we learned Morse code. We tapped messages under the dinner table when Mom told us to stop talking, and tapped through the wall between our bedrooms every night.
Dang.
When Chris got into a car accident and the doctor said he'd never wake up, I pulled up a chair next to his bed, took his hand, and tapped. "Are you there?" Nothing. But I came back the next afternoon and tapped again. Before I left, I always said the same thing. "See you tomorrow, Chris." A week later, Chris's fingers twitched against mine, and I almost fell out of my chair. I grabbed a nurse, and she barely looked up. They're reflexes. It doesn't mean anything. I bought a notebook the next day and started writing down every single one. 4 months in, Mom watched me scribbling and said, "How long are you gonna keep doing this? Until he taps back." He's not gonna tap back. You're talking to a corpse. Dad lasted a few more months before he pulled me into the hallway. "We need to talk about donating your brother's organs. His fingers move every time I hold his hand, Dad. The nurses said those are reflexes. Stop getting your hopes up, son." I don't care what the nurses say. You're not donating my brother's organs. But a week later, my parents called to have Chris transferred to a long-term facility to die, and scheduled a meeting to sign the papers. The afternoon before the meeting, I tapped into his palm like always, but this time, something tapped back. Short, short, long, short, SOS. I grabbed his hand. "Chris, if that's you, squeeze once." He squeezed so hard my knuckles cracked. I stormed into the meeting room and told them my brother just responded to me. The caseworker said, "This is very common with families who aren't ready to let go." My parents nodded. I grabbed the transfer papers off the table. "You're not signing anything until you come see for yourself." I walked them to Chris's bed and grabbed his hand. "Ask him anything." The caseworker asked what year it was. Chris squeezed out the answer. Count to 5. 5 perfect squeezes. His mother's name, tapped out letter by letter. By the 10th question, she said, "He's still alive. We can't move him." Weeks later, I asked Chris what kept him fighting when everyone gave up. Heard Mom call me a corpse. Heard Dad say donate my organs. Heard all of them leave, except you. I asked why. I wanted to see you too. My twin brother Chris and I were 9 when the flight attendant slipped me a napkin that said, "The pilot isn't who he says he is. Meet me in the back to talk." I knew she chose to tell me because of the military dog tags around my neck. I folded the napkin and slid it into my pocket, and that's when the captain's voice came over the intercom. "Good morning, folks. This is Captain Hopkins, expecting smooth skies to Chicago, but something was wrong. I could feel it in my bones. I waited 2 minutes and casually walked to the back, not knowing what to expect. The flight attendant was there with a man holding up a police badge. The man whispered, "I'm glad you're here. I'm an undercover cop." I knew something was wrong straight away. The flight attendant whispered, "I've flown with Captain Hopkins for 6 years. I don't exactly know what's wrong, but I know that's not Hopkins, and we're flying the wrong way." She showed me the flight map of where we were heading. The plane is heading toward an abandoned airport. I leaned over the map. My body was pumping with adrenaline because it was the perfect place to crash a plane. There's an empty space above the pilot's room. I can climb up and listen to what the pilot and co-pilot are planning through the ceiling. Take my number. If you can tell there's something fishy going on, text me one word, now. That's the signal to move. And to distract everyone while I climbed above the ceiling, the flight attendant made an announcement on the speakers to tell everyone to keep their seatbelts on. Through the cracks, I could hear 2 men in the pilot's room talking. 15 years ago today, our brother died because of Captain Hopkins. Now we get to crash his plane with him tied up on it while we impersonate him. I texted the undercover cop. Now, the cart slammed into the pilot's room door, and the cop kicked it open. I dropped through the ceiling and tackled the fake pilot out of his seat. The cop pinned the co-pilot to the floor. The flight attendant grabbed the radio. "Mayday, our pilot is gone. We need help landing right now." She looked at me. "Find Hopkins, the actual pilot. He has to be on this plane somewhere." I sprinted to the back of the plane, checking every door. I yanked open the closet next to the bathrooms, and Captain Hopkins was inside with his hands tied and tape across his mouth. I ripped the tape off. "Get me to the controls." He ran to the front and dropped into the pilot's chair. He grabbed the wheel. "Tower, this is the real Captain Hopkins. I'm landing this plane." When we finally landed, the cops dragged the brothers off in handcuffs. The flight attendant came up to me in the aisle. I pulled the napkin out of my pocket and held it up. "You saved 200 lives with this." She smiled and took it back. The flight attendant slipped me an...
No,
Every
and
time we heard a knock on the front door, my dad would yell, "Stealth mode," and we had 30 seconds to kill every light in the house.
Why?
My brother and I would race through the rooms, flipping switches, yanking cords, shutting off the TV mid-show, while some guy outside banged on the front door yelling, "I know you're in there, buddy." Dad timed
Who's
us.
that?
Once everything was dark, no talking, no moving, no looking out the windows. We'd sit there until Dad did his owl hoot, which meant all clear. Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes almost an hour. Afterwards, he'd high-five us and go, "Real ninjas couldn't do better." He told us stealth mode was top secret. Never tell your teachers, your friends, nobody. Other people wouldn't understand. For years, I believed him. When I was 8, I asked Dad why we had to hide so much. He said some annoying guy kept bothering our family, and stealth mode was how we dealt with him. I felt proud we had a secret skill that could outsmart bad guys. By the time I was 10, I heard the voice outside yell something about a bet and $20. I tugged Dad's sleeve and whispered, "Is the bad guy trying to steal our money?" Dad shushed me so hard I flinched. When I was 12, I broke the window rule, peeked through the blinds, and saw a completely normal guy in a polo shirt standing on the porch rubbing his forehead. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like someone's tired uncle. At 13, I told Dad I was just going to open the door and tell the guy to leave us alone. The color left his face. "You absolutely cannot do that." That was the first time stealth mode didn't feel like a game. By 15 or 16, it barely happened anymore. But when it did, Dad would peek through the blinds looking guilty. Mom just shook her head from the couch and muttered something under her breath. I was 17 and home alone when I heard it. "I know you're in there. It's been 12 years, man." I opened the front door. The guy nearly fell backwards. Normal-looking dude, middle-aged, holding a crumpled piece of paper. "Oh, hi. Is your dad home? I'm his old college roommate." He held up the paper. "Your old man bet me $20 Michael Jordan wouldn't win his 6th ring. That was 1998. I've been knocking on this door ever since." He handed me the IOU, both their signatures, right there at the bottom. I left it on the kitchen table. Mom saw it first and laughed so hard she had to hold the counter. Dad picked it up, read it, put it back down, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "So now he knows someone's home." Then he turned off the kitchen light and got under the table. We were never in danger. My dad just lost a bet because of the greatest of all time. Every time my daughter came home crying with an F because her teacher doesn't know what color blood is. The first time I realized something was wrong, Riley came home from school holding out her arm. "Look, Dad, you can see the blue blood in my veins right here." She traced the blue lines under her skin with her finger. I put down my coffee and looked at her. "Actually, sweetheart, that's not true. Blood is always red because of hemoglobin. It's just darker red in your veins." Her face scrunched up. But Mrs. Miller showed us a whole PowerPoint about it. She even had diagrams from a science book. The next morning, I packed my work scrubs in my bag. I'm an ER nurse at Mercy General, and I was working the afternoon shift anyway. I sent Mrs. Miller an email asking if I could do a quick presentation about blood for career day that afternoon. She loved the idea. When I arrived, Mrs. Miller introduced me as Riley's dad, who works at the hospital. 28 kids stared up at me from their desks. "I heard you guys learned that blood is blue inside your body," I said. The entire class nodded enthusiastically. Mrs. Miller beamed from her desk in the corner. I pulled out a blood collection tube from my pocket and held it up. "This is what we use to draw blood at the hospital. Notice something. The tube creates a vacuum. No oxygen inside at all." I paused. "When we draw blood with these, it never touches oxygen until we pop the cap off." I showed them photos on my phone of sealed blood tubes. "See? Still red." Mrs. Miller's smile started fading. She shifted in her chair and cleared her throat. A boy raised his hand and pointed to their science textbook. "But our textbook says it's blue." I picked up the book and checked the publication date, 1998. Medicine updates pretty fast. We used to think lots of things that turned out to be wrong. Mrs. Miller suddenly stood up from her desk, her hands gripping the edge. "Well, thank you for that interesting presentation, Mr. Johnson, but we need to move on to math now." I nodded and started packing when a girl in the back raised her hand. "So our textbook is wrong?" The class erupted in whispers. Mrs. Miller's jaw clenched and her voice got tight. "The curriculum says..." "Actually," I interrupted, pulling up the state science standards on my phone. I walked over and turned my phone toward her. "The current curriculum specifically mentions this myth as something to correct." She stared at the screen and her eyes narrowed. Her mouth pressed into a thin line and her nostrils flared. "Can I speak with you in the hallway?" The kids watched as we walked out and the door closed behind us. "Do you have any idea how hard it is when parents undermine my authority?" Her face was red and her voice was sharp. "Now they'll question everything I say." I kept my voice calm. "Isn't that exactly what we want them to do? Question things and learn critical thinking?" She crossed her arms tightly. "I've been teaching for 22 years. I'm not changing my whole curriculum because some nurse thinks he knows better than our textbooks." The next day, I found out Mrs. Miller gave the class a pop quiz. Riley came home crying, her face red and puffy. Her hands were shaking as she handed me a paper with a big red F on it. I took a deep breath and felt my jaw tighten as I looked at the question. "What color is blood inside the body?" Riley had written in red, and Mrs. Miller had marked it wrong. I requested a meeting with Principal Davis and brought printouts of medical textbooks, the state science standards, and Riley's quiz. The principal called in Mrs. Miller and asked her directly, "Is blood blue inside the body?" After a long pause, Mrs. Miller said, "It's what the children understand better." I leaned forward in my chair. My daughter is crying every morning before school because she's afraid of getting F's for writing down the truth. The next day, the school replaced their science books. Now whenever Riley learns something new at school, she comes home and asks me, "Dad, is this actually true, or is it just a Mrs. Miller truth?" My daughter came home crying with an F because her teacher doesn't know. I became my school's hero for 1 minute before everyone watched what happened next. I don't play around when it comes to Halloween, so during our school's Halloween dance, I dressed up in real firefighter gear from my dad's closet. Real jacket, real boots, real helmet. I strutted around the gym like I owned the place, until the fog machine popped like a toaster and the fire alarm went off. Everyone cheered thinking it was part of the show, until I smelled burnt plastic. Teachers started waving their arms, telling everyone to stay calm. But I noticed the orange extension cord powering the machine didn't stop at the wall. It ran out the side doors and down the hallway toward the science wing. Then someone near the door yelled, "Smoke in the hallway," and teachers started shouting for everyone to evacuate. Real sirens started wailing outside and fire trucks pulled up. The crowd poured into the parking lot while firefighters rushed through the main doors. That's when one of them spotted me standing near the entrance in full gear. "You, with us," he shouted. "We're clearing the east wing." I opened my mouth to say I'm just a student, but he shoved a flashlight into my hand and pushed me forward. The hallway was dark and filled with smoke. We followed the orange cord past the lockers until it disappeared under Mrs. Carter's classroom door. One of the firefighters reached for the handle and jerked back. "Hot," he said, then looked at me. "Hit it!" But I only had my foam axe. I swung as hard as I could and it bounced off with a pathetic squeak. The firefighter grabbed it, swung himself, and the foam bent in half. He stared at it, muttered, "These damn budget cuts," and
What
tossed it
budget
aside.
cuts?
That's when
They're
someone
not
shouted from
budget
down the
cuts.
hall, and he waved to the others. "Forget this door. We'll circle back once we've got tools." They started heading back down the hall, but then I heard it, a squeaky wheel spinning frantically. This was Mrs. Carter's room, and the class pet Mr. Nibbles was still inside. I turned back to the door. The handle was glowing red. I wrapped my jacket sleeve around my arm and threw my shoulder into the bottom panel until it cracked open. Smoke poured out and choked me instantly. The hamster cage was on the counter, and tiny flames were eating the papers around it. I grabbed the melted cord with my sleeve and yanked it from the wall. A spark bit through the fabric straight into my skin, and I screamed, but kept pulling until the plug came loose. I grabbed the cage with my smoking sleeve, and the metal seared into my palm. I could smell my skin burning. My lungs felt like they were filled with glass, and my vision was going black around the edges, but I ran. When I burst through the side door, I collapsed face first onto the concrete and threw Mr. Nibbles onto the grass so I wouldn't crush him. I could hear cheering as hands grabbed me, and someone pulled off my helmet. A firefighter was staring down at me. "Kid, you're a hero." That's when I heard the scream. I turned my head and watched a hawk swoop down, grab Mr. Nibbles in its talons, and fly away. I became my school's hero for 1 minute before Dad measured me for the 5th time that day and screamed, "Why are you still 5'10"? I stared down at my 5'3" dad, and he glared. "Stop looking down at me. No son of mine will ever look down on me. We're going to fix this before it's too late." And so the next day, Dad came into my room with x-rays of my legs marked with red X's saying, "I found a surgeon who will remove these bones so that you can finally be shorter than me. I already scheduled the surgery."
I thought he wanted
stared
to
in
be
horror
taller.
while Dad jumped around saying he couldn't wait to be taller than me. I knew I had to make the surgery impossible, so I started running 26 miles non-stop, and even though it hurt, I kept going until my legs gave out because I needed my bones to be so damaged they couldn't operate on me. And then on the day of my scheduled surgery, the doctor took one look at x-rays of my damaged legs and refused to operate on me. Dad got angry. Why? He's perfectly fine. But the surgeon shook his head and pointed at the x-ray. "His bones are too damaged. If I cut into them, they could shatter, and a shard of bone could hit his heart. Your son could die." Dad crossed his arms. "I'm okay taking that risk. Just do it so he can be shorter than me." But the doctor kept saying no, and I thought it was finally over. But when we got home, Dad grabbed his toolbox and said, "If a surgeon isn't going to fix this, then I'll do it myself."
Yo,
He
chill,
chased
bro,
me
chill,
around
bro,
the house
chill, bro,
screaming,
chill, bro.
"Get back here. You will be shorter than me." I ran
bro, it's
outside across
crazy.
the yard. And
Bro,
that's
it's
when Dad's
crazy.
foot got caught on the garden hose and fell down hard. And I saw both his legs were bent the wrong way. Dad screamed, and I called the ambulance. And when they arrived, paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher while one of them questioned me. "How do you know this man?" he asked. When I said he was my dad, his eyes bulged, and he looked back and forth between my dad and me, and then suddenly asked, "How is he your dad? He's so short." Dad thrashed so hard in the stretcher when he heard a paramedic had to sedate him.
He gonna take
Dad
that
measured me for the
disrespect.
5th time that
Babe, look for a bush! My
stomach is exploding! My teacher looked at my drawing, covered her mouth, and ran out of the room screaming. Our assignment was to draw something that makes us happy, so I drew me and my dad fishing at the lake, something we do every Saturday. I picked up my paper to see what she saw. 2 stick figures, a fishing rod, a lake, a building that said Larry's Bait and Tackle, and a fish that I even labeled fish in case there was any confusion. I had no idea what I did wrong. She came back with 2 security guards, still screaming, grabbed my drawing off my desk, and pointed at me like I was dangerous. They walked me out without saying a word and sat me down in Principal Carter's office. He had my drawing under a desk lamp like he was examining a ransom note. He looked up. Explain this. I told him it's me and my dad fishing at the lake. He pointed at my stick figure's hand. You're telling me this is a fishing rod when I'm looking at a weapon. I told him there's a line
bro?
with a fish on the end. And I literally wrote the word fish
exactly.
next to it. Mrs. Keller leaned in. It looks like he's aiming at the building. I told her it's Larry's Bait and Tackle where we buy worms. And he's facing the water because that's where fish live and that's how fishing works. I didn't understand how every adult in the room was looking at a fish and seeing a threat. Principal Carter picked up his phone and called my dad. Mr. Davis, your son drew an image that appears to depict a school shooting. We need you here immediately. I sat there staring at my drawing, wondering how I ended up here. My dad showed up still in his work shirt with dirt on his hands and stopped in the doorway. Where is he? What did he draw? Principal Carter slid the drawing across the desk and my dad picked it up, stared at it, and laughed. Not a chuckle, a full laugh. This is from last Saturday. He pulled out his phone, turned it around, and the photo was right there. Me standing in front of Larry's Bait and Tackle holding my fishing rod. Same building, same rod, same everything. He looked at the principal. Is everyone in this room slow? My son drew a fish, labeled it fish, drew a fishing rod, drew a bait shop, and you looked at that and saw a school shooting. Nobody said anything. You pulled my son out of class and called me at work because not one adult in this building stopped and said, hey, maybe that's a fishing rod. Mrs. Keller stared at the floor and Principal Carter had nothing. My dad put the drawing in his pocket. We're done here. Let's go. Next art class, I drew Mrs. Keller and labeled it donkey in case there was any confusion. My teacher looked at my drawing, covered her mouth, and ran out of the room. A man climbed onto our school bus with a knife, and the first thing he heard was a slow clap from the back row. Confused, he screamed at our driver, Mrs. Worley, to keep driving and not stop for anyone. A kid leaned forward. Nice ski mask. Did you cut the holes out yourself, or did your mommy help you? The whole bus laughed. He waved the knife around. Shut up and no one gets hurt. Your hand is shaking so hard I can't tell if that's a threat or a dance move. He stepped toward the kid who said it, and 20 voices started talking at once. Oh, he's walking now. Everybody watch out. He spun around trying to find who said what, but insults were coming from every direction. Bro, he's getting
roasted, bro.
No getaway car.
We're getting roasted by a bunch of good kids.
This is the saddest crime I've ever seen. We wouldn't let him finish a single sentence. Are you robbing us for money? All I have is an EBT card and a bus pass. He pointed his knife at Mrs. Worley, and the whole bus went silent. A kid stood up. You can threaten us all you want, but if you point that thing at Mrs. Worley again, we're gonna have a real different conversation. He laughed nervously and asked what a bunch of kids were going to do about it. A girl said, we're on the bus to the school for troubled teens. Half of us are here for assault, and the other half won't say why. Mrs. Worley looked at him over her shoulder. Honey, I've watched these kids make grown men cry over smaller things than pointing a knife at me. He lowered the knife. Smart choice. She brings us donuts on Fridays. We protect what matters. His face twisted, and he shoved toward the kid with the knife raised. Mrs. Worley pulled over, stood up, and stepped between them. That's enough now. He grabbed her arm and shoved her into the dashboard. For half a second, the bus was completely silent. Then a kid came over the seats like something feral, and 3 others were right behind him. The guy didn't have time to turn around before someone hit him in the back of the knees, and he went down. The knife skittered under the seats, and kids were on top of him before he could reach for it. Someone had him in a headlock while someone else pinned his arms. A girl sat on his legs and went through his pockets just to add insult to injury. Mrs. Worley pressed the emergency button. I need police at my location. Tell them there's no rush. The situation is handled. The guy was crying. Please get off me. I can't breathe. A kid leaned close to his face. You should have thought about that before you touched Mrs. Worley. When the cops showed up, they found him tied to a seat with shoelaces and snot running down his face. A man climbed onto our school bus with a knife. In the middle of a test, the sprinklers started spraying. Everyone instantly screamed, "Ah!" But I realized it wasn't water spraying on us. Someone yelled, "What is this? What is on us?" We all tried to stand up and run, but everyone was slipping. The alarm blared, and the principal yelled on the speaker, "Everyone needs to get out of the building immediately. There is an active threat inside." But just before we could get out, our teacher stepped in the way. He said, "Wait, I think I just saw the threat out there." But the hall was empty. "There's nobody out there. Let us out." I tried to grab the handle, but he slapped my my hand. No, nobody's leaving. Everyone was coughing, and that's when I realized I liked the smell. Oh my god, it was gasoline. Half the class rushed over to the windows, but we couldn't just jump out because we were on the third floor. Stacy yelled, "Please, let us out. We have to make a run for it." But he just stood there. He just said, 30 more seconds. Everyone was confused. What? We need to go. We'll die from the fumes. But he just smiled.
What?
20. What if a fire starts? We'll all burn.
Exactly.
10 seconds. A girl yelled, "Ah, it's in my eyes. I can't see." It was complete chaos until our teacher reached for the lock. He turned it. The door clicked open and someone walked in. "Thanks for letting me in, Dad." Stacy yelled, "Dad,
What?
you have a son?" They both turned around, locking eyes straight onto me. We all started backing up, and when I saw the guy's face, my heart sank. I recognized him. He pointed straight at me and said, You put me in jail for 5 years. Now it's finally time to get revenge." I couldn't believe my eyes. This was the same guy I had called the police on 5 years ago. He had tried to rob my grandma at gunpoint and had been waiting to get me back. We watched him pull something out of his pocket and hold it up, and we saw it was a big lighter. Everyone started panicking because one tiny flame, and we'd all immediately burn. I yelled, "No, please, you'll kill us all." He just smiled. He started flicking, and we all yelled, "Stop, please, we'll all die." He flicked over and over, and I knew I had to stop him before it worked. "Please, my grandma was all I had. I didn't mean to make you suffer." And when I said that, I saw our teacher look at me, but he looked upset. We were all crying, and I saw him really looking at his son like he didn't know who he was. Flick, flick. Then finally, it caught a flame. He held it up, but I saw our teacher pick up the fire extinguisher from the wall. I knew there was no way that tiny thing would save us from the fire, but his son said, "This is for what you did, for putting me in prison with those diddlers. Say goodbye." But right before he dropped the lighter, our teacher raised the fire extinguisher, and in one moment, he slammed it down on his son's head hard. His son instantly fell over, and our teacher stood there panting. He was crying. "I'm so sorry. I failed all of you. My son was a monster." The police ran in and grabbed him, and he looked at me one more time with tears in his eyes as they took him out.
Oh no.
In the middle of a test, the sprinklers, I was sitting in class when my phone buzzed. "Look under your desk." Same text. The whole class bent down at the same time. Taped underneath each desk was an envelope with our name on it. I ripped mine open, and a Polaroid slid out. A blood splatter on white tile. I looked around. Everyone was holding something different. A lamp knocked over. A knife. Drag marks on carpet. 30 different photos. All pieces of something horrible. Our phones buzzed again. Piece together the puzzle. "You have 5 minutes." Everyone jumped up. We started comparing photos. Some had timestamps. We threw them on the floor in order. Blood. Struggle, weapon, a body being dragged, a car trunk, dirt, a shovel. 3 minutes left. The photos weren't fitting right. Some inside a house, some outside. Then someone noticed the edges. They fit together like an actual puzzle. We started connecting them. Blood splatter to broken lamp, knife to drag marks. 30 photos becoming one massive crime scene. 1 minute left. Something was missing. One missing piece and the whole class fails. Everyone turns to the kid in the corner, arms crossed. "I'm not playing this sick game." The whole class turned on him. "Put it down." He didn't budge. 30 seconds, 20, then 10. He threw his photo down. The centerpiece, a child's bedroom, 2 bodies on the floor. The door swung open. Our teacher walked in clapping. "You just solved a 20-year-old cold case. When I was 8, someone left these photos in my mailbox, one each day. Pictures of my parents' murder scene." She pointed at the puzzle. "The killer left DNA on the film. 20 years later, I finally got a match." She looked at us. It was my uncle. I was sitting in class when my phone buzzed. "Look under your desk." Same text. The whole class. After 8 years on death row, I was ready to die. They said I killed Rebecca. My fingerprints were on the knife. My blood was at the scene. I told them I didn't do it, but nobody believed me. I spent years fighting, filed every appeal, exposed every contradiction in the evidence. None of it mattered. My lawyer stopped returning my calls. My appeals were exhausted. My family stopped visiting 2 years ago. Even my own mother thought I did it. The only person who ever believed me was my grandmother, and she passed away 5 years ago. So when they asked what I wanted for my last meal, I thought of her. Her meatloaf, the one she made me every birthday. I wrote out her recipe from memory, every measurement and technique precise. An hour later, the prison chef showed up at my cell holding my form. "What is this?" "Meatloaf. This is a novel, not a recipe. Ground beef 60%, ground pork 40, breadcrumbs soaked in whole milk for exactly 10 minutes. Yellow onion, not white, sautéed in butter until translucent. Fresh thyme, not dried. Worcestershire, 2 tablespoons, no substitutes. And this glaze with brown sugar and apple cider vinegar, brushed on at 340 degrees, 20 minutes before done." He looked at me through the bars. "Why so specific?" "It's how my grandmother made it. She's gone now. If I'm going to die Friday, I want to taste her cooking one last time." He was quiet for a moment. "Some of these ingredients we don't stock. Fresh thyme, whole milk, real butter. I'll have to special order them. I have 48 hours. He sighed. "I'll make it exactly how you wrote it." Thursday morning, the ingredients arrived and the chef started cooking. I could smell it from my cell an hour later. Onions sautéing in butter. Grandma's kitchen. Saturday mornings, her humming while she cooked. I sat on my bunk and cried for the first time in 8 years. Thursday afternoon, the chef ran into problems. The oven temperature wouldn't hold steady. He had to recalibrate, start over on the glaze twice. It has to be perfect, he told the warden. It's his last meal. Thursday night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, from the smell. The meatloaf baking through the night while I sat alone with memories of the only person who believed I was innocent. Friday, execution day. 10 a.m. and no meal yet. Noon, and the chef said the glaze wasn't right. 2 p.m., a guard brought regular prison lunch because the meatloaf still wasn't ready. 4 p.m., 2 hours left. The smell was overwhelming. Guards kept walking past the kitchen just to breathe it in. 5 p.m., the warden came to my cell. Your meal isn't ready. We're delaying the execution 2 hours. 6 p.m. came and went. The original execution time. I was still alive, waiting for meatloaf. 7:30, the chef finally appeared with a covered plate. He looked exhausted. He uncovered it, and the meatloaf looked exactly like my grandmother's. I ate slowly, savored every bite. Perfect. I finished the last bite at 7:51. 9 minutes left. The guard opened my cell. Time to go, Preston. They walked me down the hallway past other cells. Inmates were silent. They always were during execution walks. We reached the preparation room. The chaplain asked if I wanted to pray. I said no. 7:55, 5 minutes. They started walking me toward the chamber. That's when the warden's phone rang. He answered and his face changed. Stop. Everyone stop moving. What's happening? Rebecca's ex-boyfriend just confessed to her murder. You're innocent. My legs gave out. A guard caught me. The chef appeared in the hallway out of breath. He slid down the wall and sat next to me. If that meatloaf had been ready on time, you'd already be gone. I just sat there, still alive, because my grandmother's recipe was too complicated to rush. She saved my life. She always did. After 8 years on death row,
But guys, if you want to see me react to more his story shorts, make sure to smash that like button, hit subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next vid.